1, 2. Hi, everyone. Hello, hello, hello. If everyone can just take a seat, please, and we'll get started in around 5 minutes. So try and squish up and make room for people who haven't got seats, and we'll get started in around 5 minutes. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. We'll get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the October edition of London Gophers here at Monzo. On the screen here, you can see our very generous recurring sponsors, and we're going to be hearing a bit from them right now. Just a quick run through of this evening's format. It says a quick welcome from the sponsors, and then get straight into our first two talks. Then we're going to have a break, and then after the break, we've got a slightly new format where we're going to have a fireside chat with no fire. And so that'll be talking about tooling and modules, and then at the end, we'll head off and we'll give the location that I've totally forgotten. It's just down a pub down the road there for a bit of socializing. So I will hand over to Marcelo from Monzo to talk about Monzo.
Thank you. Thanks, Paul. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Full house. Hi. Hello. Welcome to Monzo. Really happy to have all you here. It's a pleasure to sponsor London Gophers. I mean, we are a Go shop, so there's no way that we would be out of this. Just so you know, for those who doesn't know about Monzo, we're a bank. We have these very bright cards. Some people call pink, some people call hot salmon, but it's actually hot coral. That's how we call them. And we are building a bank, a better bank for everyone. So that's our mission, actually, to make money work for everyone. And of course, when we talk about Monzo, we've been live for 4 years, nearly 5 years now. But in 2015, that's when we launched Monzo Prepaid. So we were not a bank back then. But just so you know, today we have more than 3 million customers here at Monzo, and the growth has been quite exponential, I would say. Just so you know, for example, last September in 2018, we got our the milestone, like first million customer. 8 months later, 2 million customers. 4 months later, 3 million customers, and we are already 3.2. So I think that's impressive. And most of this is actually mouth to mouth, people recommending. We currently have the best customer service bank in the UK. I don't think that's not putting our customer support in a bad spot, but like legacy banks, they don't provide a great customer service, I would say. So we are competing actually with companies that have amazing customer service, and that's, I think, where we should be aiming at. Some engineering facts. We were just checking today, actually. We do, on average, 100 deployments a day to production, which is, I think, amazing. Maybe a consequence of our architecture microservices. And of course, as I said, our mission is to make money work for everyone, and everyone is not just UK. So we are slowly growing and expanding. So we recently launched in the US, and I think, and hopefully, they will see what it's like to have Monzo and work with Monzo. So I'd love to join the team and help build a better bank for the world. An engineer. And we are hiring. Hey, so many people. You're in Monzo, here in Monzo already. So contractors. What? So what are the possibilities here? We currently have a few roles. I just wanted to, instead of just showing what the roles are, like backend engineer, I just wanted to explain a little bit more about what are the challenges and things that these squads that are currently hiring are doing. So we have roles for backend in the platform team. You're probably going to be working very closely with Suhail, for example. We have backend in ops as a tech lead hat. So a tech lead is just someone that it's hands-on. It's an individual contributor. And backend in money. So, and I love this quick fact, but in 2018, like Monzo has been used quite a lot, more than 170 million times. Cool. These are some of the benefits that we provide. So we're talking about compensation, like performance review every 6 months, flexible working hours. So you can work or start from, let's say, 8 or 10 a.m. You can work from home. So I work 3 days per week from home. And people can work up to 4 if they want. Holidays, I think that's pretty much standard. Health and well-being, we have a huge focus on mental health. Having yoga here. Another thing is that to make people, be as healthy as possible and also happy. We have learning budgets. We have pension. The emoji for family didn't work. It was a hardcore halt. But we have parental leave as well. Very focused on community, such as these events today, but also other events for other areas and also our engagement with the community and commuting, like cycle to work scheme, for example. So if you want to apply, if you want to find out more, there's so much more information online, not only in our careers page, but if you search on YouTube, there are so many talks from our amazing engineers. Some of them are here today, besides Suhail, and some of them, where are they? They always hide. They sit somewhere before the event starts, and then they, oh, Miles there. Yeah, and beanbags. So just grab us, talk to us. We are very happy to share what the day life is here at Monzo. And yeah, make sure that if you apply, you refer London Gophers Meetup. It's a way for us to continue sponsor and be present in the community and show like it's worth being here and also like support. So have a lovely event. Sorry for the very long pitch. It's like my voice. Yeah, have a great time.
Thanks, Marcelo. And moving on now, we're going to introduce Utility Warehouse as one of our new recurring sponsors. Monzo are very kind to also host us as a sponsor as well. But our recurring sponsors are sort of giving us money every month in order to keep this meetup running and help us meet costs. So that's why these things happen for free, all the food, pizza, etc. So it's not just the host, but also the recurring sponsors. So delighted to welcome Martin from Utility Warehouse as a new recurring sponsor to talk a bit about them.
Hi, everybody. So I'm going to be quick because I don't want to hold up the talks. I'm Martin from Utility Warehouse. I'm just going to quickly tell you a little bit about what we do. You might have guessed we're a utility company. What makes us unique? You can get all your utilities, so electricity, gas, broadband, landline, mobile, home insurance, all on one monthly bill. So why are we sponsoring the Go Meetup? So over the last 3 years, we've been completely transforming our technology department, going from around 20 developers and no Go at all to around 100 developers now who are mostly doing Go. So if it wasn't for great developers we could get from the Go community, we wouldn't be able to do that and achieve so much. So this is our way of giving something back. We have lots of other ways of giving to the community. We're big on open source. If you want to hear more about that, come and talk to us afterwards. So what roles are we hiring for? There's a whole range of roles. I think we've got 10-ish, over 10 roles open at the moment, some more full stack, some more back end. All for very different teams. What they all have in common is the teams are pretty much self-organizing and empowered and in charge of their own destiny, build their own stuff and operate their own stuff. You hear that from a lot of companies nowadays. Sometimes it's more true, sometimes it's less true, but I think we're doing it properly. So if that sounds like it's for you, come talk to us. What else can I tell you? So we've been going about 3 years. Isn't it getting boring yet? Well, actually, no. So we set off to replace a legacy stack. That was the beginning job. We're now towards the end of that, and we're about to embark on the really exciting stuff, big company growth, new products, new and interesting stuff, which is why we're still growing and hiring. So a little bit about the tech we use. I almost didn't want to put this on because the real answer to what is our tech stack, the answer is kind of whatever the teams feel they need to do to get the job done, as long as it can run in Kubernetes. But this is an example of the stuff that's becoming our de facto standards. So again, if that sounds like the kind of thing you want to look at, come and talk to us. Yeah, I think that's it from me. Thank you. Oh, some links.
Thank you. And Martin, you're going to be standing near the table there during the break. Table of t-shirts have almost gone. Great, thank you very much. Right, this is the place. It's called The Fox, and it's just directly down that road there. So we'll be heading there afterwards just for a bit of socializing. Please come along and join us. Yes, speakers would love feedback, and so if people are able to give feedback, it's much appreciated. It says September Gophers there, but of course we're in October. So that's the link there. We'll be sending out the slide deck afterwards, so you'll be able to click through instead of having to remember this. Without further ado, we have Suhail, who's going to talk to us now about Reflect.
Fantastic. Full house. Really, really nice to see. Amazing. Thank you to our lovely tech ops team who've got that all sorted. Hopefully everyone can see that. Yeah, let's get started. So yeah, thank you for coming to this talk on learning to reflect. And also thank you to Monzo for hosting this event. Before we get started with that, the other day I was actually browsing through our company Slack and found that we used to have this old Slack channel called Semaphore. As someone who's interested in locking systems, it sounded intriguing. And reading more into it, though, the purpose of this channel was to coordinate access to 10 remote machines that were used to power our customer operations in the past. So what would happen is a human would come into this channel, declare a number, and essentially lock access to that machine. The reason this needed to be done was because if someone else SSH'd into the machine and started running commands, the previous person would get booted out. So if you're running something that was like long running and you got booted out midway, that isn't a very pleasant experience. So people were pretty fast in acquiring these locks, but they weren't very judicious in releasing them. So at some point, you end up in a deadlock scenario where you have all 10 locks acquired and no locks free to run your customer operation stuff. So this is something that we need to solve for. And yep, you guessed it. We put in a Slack reminder, 4 in the morning, auto release of all locks via a Slack bot reminder. If you cross the 4 a.m. boundary and you are still running your query, you better make sure that you acquire the lock again. I just love this the chaos around this entire system. But happily, we've grown a lot and gotten a lot more engineers to actually fix this properly and introduce better automation. And we've gotten rid of all of those 10 machines, which is really nice. So yeah, on to the main program. We're going to spend the next 20 minutes talking about the Reflect package in Go and how to get started with it. Bit of an introduction. My name is Sahel. I am a platform engineer on the platform squad at Monzo. The platform squad builds the foundation so that engineers can ship their services without having to worry about all of the underlying infrastructure that operates their services. They don't have to worry about whether there's enough database space in the cluster or whether there's enough compute capacity in the cluster. Most of the time, it involves debugging things like Kubernetes and Cassandra and Go, which is why I'm here. Bit of an introduction about Monzo, apart from what Marcelo has already said. We have 3 million plus customers. I have no idea, we've just grown the additional 200,000 customers since I wrote this slide. That's pretty great to see. And we have this many customers who trust us with their money. Our mission is to make money work for you. We also have these really nice hot coral cards. And if you haven't seen them, definitely catch one of us in the crowd and we'll be happy to show you ours. Why am I stood here talking about reflection? It's no secret that Monzo uses Go for all of our microservices. We have 1,500 of them running in production right now to operate the bank. We love Go. It's also no open secret that we use Cassandra to store all of our stateful data. And to marry the communication between Go and Cassandra, we use 2 libraries, GoSQL and GoCasa. So the tale of this story starts in June. I was profiling some of our microservices running in production using the Golang's amazing pprof tooling, and was seeing a general trend where a lot of time was being spent unmarshalling data in our ORM layer. Here's one of the profiles on the screen. You can see that a large proportion of time of CPU time is being spent decoding into structs. Now, under the hood, data would come from our Cassandra driver as a single or a list of key value maps. You might have seen map string interfaces before if you work with Go. And what we wanted is that engineers want to work with well-defined structs and to take advantage of things like typing and struct access and stuff like that. This sort of unmarshalling shouldn't really be the biggest CPU hog in our services. We saw so much CPU time being spent on things like these. And when we aggregated the metrics, we saw services which were using multiple CPU cores just to process all of this data. So long story short, we did a deep dive and rewrote a lot of the decoding using custom reflection and ripped out a lot of the internals of the library under the hood by leveraging prior information about the types that were being defined. The end result was a big performance improvement. for some of our services. This service in particular, which allows our customer operations to serve all of our wonderful customers with great support, saw the latency drop from 500 milliseconds in the P99 to just 25 milliseconds. The CPU usage just dropped significantly, dropped to fractions of a core. And because this was a library level change, all of our microservices that use Cassandra could benefit immediately without having to change a single line of code. I mean, as engineers, like having someone else do the work and for you to reap the benefits of speed improvements, that's what we live for, right? If you're interested in the change itself, all of this library code is open source. We are also big proponents of open source. So the PR is up there. Go and have a look. The slides are also already online. And yeah, I'm sure they will be shared afterwards. So if you ask most folks about the reflect package, you might have come across this method, deep equal, which allows you to do a deep comparison of things like the structs or maps or lists. It's really useful if you're doing something like testing with asserting to see if two structs are functionally equivalent. But the reflect package has much more beyond that and has some pretty neat capabilities. And getting started with it is not very hard. So the remainder of this talk, we'll go through this canonical example where we're essentially taking this piece of data that we might have received from a database or as input, and and building a conversion into a struct model, which we can use in the rest of our program. So yeah, we've got these two structs defined, which map to various fields. So we now need to write the function, which will take the map string interface data and assign all the fields into this user struct and the corresponding user job struct for the embedded map string interface. Now, if you are writing this function by hand, you might do something like this, where you would take every value in the map, check if it's present, do some type coercing to make sure that the compiler doesn't moan at you, and then assign it to the various fields in the struct. This is a little bit tedious if you're writing this by hand, but luckily there are a lot of generators which can write all of this tedious code for you. But what if we wanted to use reflection? What if we didn't have the capability of changing the services? What if you're working at a different level of abstraction? So before we dive into that, let's talk about the laws of reflection in Go. There are 3 particular laws, and once you get familiar with them, understanding reflection gets a lot more easier. So law number 1, reflection is a way to get from an interface value to a reflect object. What does this mean concretely? So when you call a particular method like reflect.typeOf or reflect.valueOf, the argument you pass in is taken in as an interface, and what you get back is a struct, a reflect.type or a reflect.value, depending on what method you call. Law number 2, reflection goes back from the reflect object back to an interface value. So essentially, it's the inverse of law 1. So in this particular example, we can coerce n, n being the name actually, into a reflect object. So at that point, v is going to be a reflect.value, and then coerce it back by calling the interface method back into a string. The third and final law is that if we want to modify a reflect object, its value must be settable. This law is pretty important to understand, and it's the one that trips most people up and leads to bugs and unintended behavior. What does settable mean in practice, though? So this example looks perfectly reasonable. We're taking a value, we're coercing it into a reflect value, we're setting it a string value, so we're changing from my name to Bingo, and then we're trying to print this name. And the reflect method has a particular method setString, which will change the underlying value. This looks like it would work, but when you actually run it, you get a very nice panic, which says that this particular value must be assignable. And the reason for that is the reflect package doesn't work with values. You can't beat the laws of Go. You have to do by pointer essentially, rather than by value. I'm not able to change this assignment at runtime. Yeah, so essentially I was passing name by value. So you're essentially passing a copy of the string Sahel. You're not passing the address of the string Sahel so that it can change it under the hood. This wouldn't be settable if you were writing normal Go. With reflection, there is no special exemption from that. To make this work, you need to send a pointer to setString and to the reflector value, and have it point to a memory address that you can change and you can change the storage under the hood. So note the addition of the ampersand to send a pointer to name rather than the raw string value, and the changes in setting the actual element under the pointer rather than the actual value itself. So yeah, once I've done that, I get the expected value and I can change my name to Bingo. Yeah. So now we know about the laws. Let's go back to our user example. So notice how I kept all of the struct fields as public. There are no private fields. If we had kept them private, the reflect package can't do any magic and see what they are under the hood. So the reflect package can't beat the laws of Go. You've got to keep these struct fields public so that the reflect package can access them and set them if you ask it to. You can't bypass the attributes of the Go programming language. So we need to write an unmarshal method, which can use reflection. It is a layer of indirection, but it will allow us to unmarshal any map into any struct. So let's make sure that we've got, we're going to start with some quick validation, make sure that we've got a pointer, and then it's a pointer to a struct. So to do this, we can use the reflect, the kind method in the reflect package to make sure that we've got these, we've got a pointer and a struct. Now, to do the actual assignment, we can loop through all of the fields in the struct. So with the reflect package, you can call struct fields and stuff like that, which will give you all of the data back, all of the fields that are public within the struct. And then what we can do is we can coerce them into lowercase and set them from values from our map. Now, of course, there are many edge cases around this. If you're writing actual unmarshalling code, you might want it to be much more robust. But for this simple example, this would work. There is some funny work going on around iterating over numerical struct fields. This is so you can support things like embedded structs. But yeah, if you're more interested in that, check out the Go docs for the reflect package. Oh, blank slide. No idea why that's there. But yeah, this naive version will work for most of the fields. But for the job field, it will try and set a map string interface for the user job struct, and that's no good if we retain our naive version, because you can't coerce a map string interface into a struct. So that will essentially cause a panic if we don't handle that mismatch in types. So handling that requires a ton more code. And I've put all of the code that I used for this on the GitHub link there. And if you're interested in how I actually get it to create a pointer dynamically and set all of the fields, you can definitely go check out that code. It's like more than 50 lines, and it's got tests. Yeah, so visit the URL, and it has. You can look at it in your own leisure. Reflection is quite powerful in Go, but it does come at a cost. Firstly, all of the great compile time checking and validation that makes Golang really, really nice is practically thrown out the window. So with reflection, you only get to know if your program is buggy at runtime when you get one of these messages, a panic whilst your program is running. So while you're developing, especially, you get pretty used to seeing panics like these whilst you're debugging. I would strongly recommend, if you're writing a reflection code, have a strong test suite to make sure that you don't introduce any regressions as you're iterating. Also, reflection can be much slower than writing your code by hand. So for our test program, I wrote a very crude benchmark, which would iterate over the same map over and over again. And the hand-rolled version, the one where I was checking for each field in the map string interface and setting the appropriate value in the struct, was an order of magnitude faster. Go can't be smart when you're using reflection about where it allocates memory, whether it's on the stack or the heap, or applying clever compiler time optimizations. It's got to do everything at runtime. Don't read too much into this benchmark though, because there are definitely some optimizations we can make on the reflection side. But yeah, constantly running reflection on a struct which is going to be static is going to be very costly, and you can definitely apply some optimizations to get that number down. But it is going to be slower than the hand-rolled version. We've covered a few functions in the reflect package in this talk, but there are a whole bunch of others which would allow you to inspect structs, set maps, set elements of maps without knowing anything about the underlying storage under the hood. You can see whether a particular type can be coerced into another type, or whether a particular field is assignable. Get struct tags. So if you've worked with the JSON .marshal, JSON marshalling and unmarshalling, you might wonder how the struct tags work, where you can set the fields that it will decode from. That all works with struct tags, and that all works by the Reflect package. So yeah, definitely check out the Go docs on the Reflect package at the link over there, as all the properties are really well documented. And that's about it. And thank you to everyone hosting London Gophers. Yeah, sure. We do have some time for questions.
Questions. Oh, everyone's shy tonight. Oh, hang on, there's one in the front row.
If I understood the talk correctly, you kind of showed us how to implement the map structure package. And at the start, with your sort of performance analysis, you were showing that map structure was taking a lot of processor time.
Yep.
And the JSON and YAML parsers in Go work in a fairly similar way using reflection.
Yep.
I'm just wondering whether you think optimizing reflection is the best way to do parsing, or whether you think we should be doing code generation or something like that.
Yeah, that is definitely a very good point. I would definitely say that if you can do code generation, then that is far more preferable, and that's why I put the benchmark up there, because the hand-rolled version, no matter how much you optimize the reflection, the charts that I showed was just optimizing for reflection. But if you could do code generation, it's going to be an order of magnitude faster all the time, hands down, and you get a lot more compile time benefits along with it. For us, when we did those particular optimizations, we didn't want to change over 500 plus services to add that code generation in. That would have been quite difficult for us. So we made a change at the library level by optimizing the reflection that was under the hood. But yes, definitely, if you can do code generation, then do code generation.
No more
Any
questions.
other questions?
Brilliant. You're all done.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great. Hopefully. Oh, hang on. Okay, you can give me two minutes, Amnon. This is a reminder of who we are. You're here already. Please follow us on Twitter as well. That's one of our largest means of communication. There's a large Slack channel population as well. Lots of conversation happening in there, as well as the meetup group. Don't worry for fears that we won't be charging you for coming to this meetup in the future if anybody saw any worries about that during the week. The LondonGophers study group is also active as well. As I said, these slides will be published afterwards, so you can take photos now, but also these slides will be available at the end. Beth, who is just here, can chat to anybody about the study group during the break. So we have two raffles this evening. The first is for the regular JetBrains licenses. JetBrains kindly donates some free licenses. That's a year-long license. Take a photo of this slide and enter the raffle before the end of the meetup if you're interested in winning a year's license to JetBrains, and that's either GoLand or any of the ultimate packages that they offer. Snap, 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 snap. But this slide will come up again if you missed it. You just have to enter before the end of the meetup. And the second raffle this evening is a free ticket to Advanced Ultimate Go. The course is being held in November. And we are raffling off a free ticket. There is also a $50 discount to if you don't win as part of the raffle, you can also get a $50 discount. So if you go to this webpage here, you will be able to enter the raffle for the free ticket, but there's also a link with the code for the discount code as well. So just take a quick snap of this. You will see it again towards the end. Oh, hang on. My screen is showing, but it's not updating. Use the clicker. Oh, the clicker's working. Wow, amazing. There you go. Take a photo of that one. Wow, how did that work? I was driving it via another screen. Okay. There we go. So now we can invite Amnon onto stage to talk to us about the single static executable.
Right, hello, London Gophers. So I'm Amnon, spelled for small a. I've been told that I have to stay within this square here because that's where the camera goes. The problem is I need to point to the slides, which means I disappear from the camera, but I think you guys can still see me, I think. I'm not sure about that. So I won't repeat the joke from a year ago why I'm spelled for small a. You just have to bear with me. And I'm going to talk about my favorite feature in Go, because everyone has their favorite features, and people talk a lot about Go routines, they talk a lot about channels, but my favorite feature is the fact that when you compile it, you produce a single statically linked executable, which is something people don't talk enough about. So I'm going to rant a bit here. Now, I just apologize for all the bling and all the sort of garish colors and all the crazy fonts and so on. I'm a repressed graphic designer. So you just have to bear with me. And so basically, we all, you build a program, you compile it, and it produces, a single file. A big file, your hello world weighs in as 2 megabytes. And the reason is it's got everything inside it. It's got a garbage collection. It's got a runtime. It's got everything. And I'm going to just talk a bit about why this is awesome. I mean, this, of course, you can cross-compile. You want to run on your Raspberry Pi. You just change your 2 environment variables, your goose, your gotch, and it spits out a executable which will run on an ARM. So that's all very cool. If anybody's played around with building tool chains, cross-compiling using GCC, and the enormous pain you have to go through, being able to just make that change with 2 environment variables is really nice. But why is this a big deal? Why am I going on about this? Because isn't this the way computers work? Isn't this the way computers always worked? You have source code, you compile it, you produce an executable, that's it. You copy that executable, it runs. And to sort of explain why it's awesome, you have to compare with other languages and what happens with some of the scripting and interpreted languages. So I'm going to actually, in this talk, I'm not actually going to talk at all about Go, even though this is a Go meetup. I'm going to talk about other languages. So here on the left side, there's a go.mod file, which we all use now in the days of modules to define our dependencies. And does anybody know what this file over here is? Any Pythonistas around? So I'm a sort of a bit of a Pythonista as well, although people, real Pythonistas, will disagree. So that's a requirements.txt file, which is one of the ways in Python you define your dependencies. And the 2 files look very similar. They both have the package names, they both have the versions, they both kind of use semver. But there's one really, really crucial, really fundamental difference. And has anybody got an idea what difference I'm looking for? Any offers? It's not a hashes, not the URL. Oh, it's not for what, it's the when. So the fundamental difference is this all gets resolved when you build. Now, in the Python world, and really with any interpreted language, this gets resolved every time you deploy your code to a system. Every time you install the code on a new machine, all the dependencies have to be downloaded, all the dependencies have to be resolved. And that's a very fundamental difference, because in Go, you basically deploy a file. You basically copy a file onto your server, onto your container, onto wherever you're going to run. Whereas in Python or any interpreted language, you're deploying a universe. You're deploying your interpreter. You're deploying an entire set of libraries and dependencies. And that means that if you're deploying more than one script, more than one program on a machine, as you tend to do, you don't tend to buy a new machine for every program you deploy, then you need to make sure that you're in trouble if your different scripts require different versions of the dependencies. And then the smart people in the Python world have created all kinds of solutions to get around this. And the most common one is a virtual env, which is basically a directory where you install your entire Python world, all your dependencies, all your libraries. And then by magic of changing environment variables, you get your execution. You get your execution to find the dependencies from its own, copy of the universe. And that also means, has a nasty side effect, that you can't just run a program. You have to activate your virtual env. You have to source a bash file which will set the right environment variables, so that the interpreter will find the right dependencies. Now, things actually get. Now, this is a diagram which I didn't make it, and it's not somebody taking a mic. It's actually a real diagram from an excellent website called Full Stack Python, and it's basically how do you deploy a simple web app onto a server. So this is what happens, and you'll have to, anybody who's seeing me on the video will have to excuse me about me disappearing, because your app is this little thing over here, which lives inside a virtual env with all its dependencies. And your web app itself isn't a standalone thing. It talks a protocol. It basically has an API, and you have to put it inside a WSGI container in order that it can talk HTTP. Now, then the other obvious thing is you have to have a separate web server, which is a thing on the top. You have to have your Apache or your Nginx, because the built-in web servers in the Python frameworks, in your Flask, in Django, they all have their web servers, but all the web servers are toys, which don't handle SSL termination, which don't handle concurrent requests. So they're not usable for anything apart from development. So you need to be not only an expert in your own code, but also in configuring web services, in web servers, in setting up a WSGI containers. And then you've got this thing over here, which is your task queues. So the task queues are really the Python world's answer to Go routines. So when you have a long-running service, a long-running operation which you need to fire off from an HTTP request, you just launch a Go routine. It's trivial. Now, in the Python world, they have these task queues. The most common one of them is Celery, which and I've just copied a little section of the frequently asked questions from the Celery website. And it's got all these amazing questions. Does Celery really consist of 50,000 lines of code? And the answer, no, not at all. It's only 30,000. And questions like, I'm having integrity area duplicate keys. Why? Or why aren't the worker isn't doing anything, just hanging? MySQL is throwing deadlock errors. What do I do? Task results aren't reliably returning. So, lots of, I've purged all the messages. There's still more messages left in the queue. So lots of really fun stuff. And what the great thing about Go routines are? The great thing about Go routines is you never need to know about this stuff. You never have to troubleshoot this stuff. So I'm going to try to go backwards. So now I've gone forward, gone the wrong direction. How do I go back? Not the laptop, right? How do I? Button below, right. So let's go back. So this is deploying a simple web app in Python. Now, I couldn't find a Go version of this diagram, so I had to draw my own with my very limited graphic skills. And, oops, sorry about that. Let's go back again. And this is the Go version. So, because you don't, if I go back again, because there's, the detail is all in your single static executable. So if we go back to this diagram, you don't need Apache, you don't need Nginx, you don't need a real web server, because the net HTTP library is a real web server, which is industrial strength. You don't need a tasky framework because you've got Go routines. You don't need virtual enums because your executable is statically linked and contains all the dependencies. So it makes life enormously easier. So really, just to wrap up, when you build a Go app, all the dependencies are resolved in build time rather than deploy time. You just have one file which you need to copy to your target machine. Only one executable, one process you need to run. And finally, Go is fun to write, but it's even funner to deploy. Well, I don't know if fun is a word, but that's it. Thanks very much, guys.
Quick question. Any quick questions? Otherwise, you can catch Amnon at the break. We'll catch Amnon at the break. Thank you, Amnon. Oh, God. I'm getting excited. Now we're on today's break conundrum. So we'll quickly break for 10 minutes. We'll leave this up on screen. And Daniel is going to talk us through the solution to the conundrum after the break. Some drinks over here. Utility warehouse here. Anyone from Bud here? Bud. No one from Bud here. Martin Gallagher, who's here, they're just there, one of our other sponsors. So be sure to speak to any of our sponsors if you're interested in working at Utility Warehouse, Monzo, no one here from Bud, or speaking to Martin from Vista's Recruitment. Okay, see you in 10 minutes. Okay, everyone, we're going to get started in 5 minutes, please. But do we have Paul Berlumi or Mark Curry here, please? Paul Berlumi or Mark Curry? Come and see us. Okay, folks, everyone start to take their seats, please.
Please sit down. We're going to continue with the conundrum. I'm going to start shushing you, and I've got the microphone, so I'm going to win. So this conundrum, can everybody read the font? Can everybody read the code? So we've got 4 variables with 4 expressions, and we're asking what's the length and capacity of each one of those. So let's start with the lengths. Does anybody want to have a guess at what the lengths of each one of those expressions is? We can start with B1. What's the length of B1? 1. No. 2. Yes. So what's the length of the second one, B2? 2. Yes, correct. The third? 2. Yes. The fourth? No. Yes. So the lengths are pretty simple. Does anybody want to have a guess at why it's 2 for each one of those? Because it's? It doesn't have anything to do with the byte. Well, not with the byte per se. It's to do with the slice. So you've got an expression that has a length of 3, such as the 0, 1, 2 string, and then you take all elements except the first one, so you've got a length of 2, because you've got 2 elements left. So far, so good? That was the easy part. So now we move on to the capacity. So what's the capacity of B1? 3, no. 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 Okay, let's go up from 4. Okay, let's try to reason about it. And Ian, you're not allowed to answer. So we're converting a string variable to a byte slice, and then taking all the elements except the first one. If we've got a slice that has capacity 10, for example, and then we take that slice from 1 till the end, so all elements except the first, what capacity are we left with? if we had a capacity of 10 initially, and then we take the first one out. Somebody said 0. No, that's very wrong. 9. Somebody said 9. Yes, it's 9. So the first one, we lose 1 capacity, but what was the original capacity there? 9 plus 1. 10. No. I said 10, but I was trying to mislead you. It worked. So what actually happens here is the Go compiler does not optimize that line well, so it ends up making a copy of the string somewhere in memory, be it the stack or the heap, we don't know. And the minimum size, minimum capacity that does that with is 32 bytes. And then we take the first one out, and the first capacity of B1 is 31. You're not going to see it here because I don't want to show all the answers, but it's 31, trust me. What's the capacity of the second one? It's kind of similar, but we take the slice before converting to byte slice. 31, no. It is 32, but why? Yes, so we're converting to the byte slice after slicing. So the copy happens after, so we allocate the new byte slice after, so it's 32. Cool. What about the third one? So it's the same, but instead of using S, the string is inlined. It's just right there. The person who said 2, did you cheat or something? How did you know that? Who was that? So why is it 2? Correct? Yep. So the third one, the capacity is 2 because the compiler basically figures it all out, and it's just a constant. I'm not going to say constant expression, but it's evaluated without making copies in memory. What about the fourth one? Capacity of the fourth one? No takers? 2, no, it's not 2. It is 32. Does anybody want to have a guess why? The compiler is bad, yes. So in this case, you could argue the compiler could also see and figure it out and not have to do memory copy, but it's not smart enough for that, so it's 32. So if I use the clicker for a second, and if I didn't get anything wrong, whoa, 1 second. I forgot to build attention, sorry about that. There we go. So 31, 32, 2, 32. But just FYI, these are just implementation details about the Go compiler, so do not rely on these numbers because they are likely to change in the future. Well, don't rely on them, just don't ask. Thank you.
Okay, so now for the experimental format where... Oh, no, hang on, it's not. I'm just reminding you about the raffle. Sorry, here we go. Here is the JetBrains raffle for the free JetBrains licenses. Enter before the end of this evening's proceedings at 9 o'clock. And here is the Advanced Go. This is the free ticket to the Advanced Go workshop we're raffling off here. And also, if you follow that link to our website, there is the discount code. So just a reminder, it's a $50 discount code. Okay, and enter before the end of this evening. Perfect. So now we're going to try this different format where if I can invite Ian. Oh, no, sorry, I've forgotten. Got to go back. So we are looking for, hang on. Two very kind people who gave feedback to speakers in previous months have won themselves special limited edition London Gophers pins. They're not very big, but here they are. We're looking for Paul Bellumi. Oh, come up, Paul. It's fantastic. Thank you. And my pronunciation here is going to be horrendous. Mark Corey? Oh, dear. Not here. For anyone who gives feedback this month, and I won't skip back. We'll show you put up the feedback link at the end of this. You also have the chance to win a LondonGophers pin. It's in the corner. Sorry, thank you, yes. Top right-hand corner. Why am I standing up the front? You will also win a limited edition London Gophers pin. So thank you to Paul and Mark, and please, you're encouraged to give feedback to speakers. So let us, without further ado, move to our experimental phase now, which is the fireside chat. Can I invite Daniel and Ian to join me? Daniel has spoken at London Gophers before. He's based up in Sheffield and runs Go Sheffield, as well as contributing to the Go project. And Ian is visiting from the Go Tools team at Google in New York. So please welcome Daniel and Ian. Okay, so this is an experiment. And the format of this evening, if I can just load the format on my phone here, we're also welcoming anybody who's watching online as well. What we're going to do is we're going to have a starter session, but talking on a couple of topics that might be of interest to folks in the audience for about the first 15 minutes odd. Then we're going to open up to questions from anyone here in the audience. Really, you can ask about anything. Ian is, as I said, is visiting from the Go team in New York at Google. And we sort of nominally said tooling and modules, really because that's Ian's domain, but you can really ask anything. Daniel, as I said, is a huge contributor to the tools community, the Go tools community, and the Go project itself. So perhaps if you have questions about open source contributions, anything along those lines, it's really all up for discussion. So let me just make sure. So I'm just reading through a few notes here. Remote questions, please ask via Slack channel or YouTube. Thank you. We have Antonio, who's doing an amazing job on that. Okay, so Ian, do you want to kick us off by introducing yourself? I've given a very basic introduction there.
Sure. So as Paul said, I work for Google, although I do basically no work for Google at all. I just work for you guys. Daniel just complained that I apparently don't look like my photo. I can't see that. I have been running the Go Tools team for about 2 years. I've been at Google for about 9 years. I've been a professional programmer for about 30-something years. And yeah, it's a great job. My team is about 8 people, which is minuscule. We're the Go team as a whole is probably the smallest language team in existence, I would imagine. But that's just because Go is awesome.
Daniel, over to you.
So I don't know how to follow that because I cannot say any of those things. But I do kind of look like my picture. At least it's not a Pokemon, so that's something. So like Paul said, I live in Sheffield. I organize the meetup there. And that's mainly because I used to come to this meetup very often and I missed it so much. So I think it's a great thing. I've been contributing to Go for a while, so I do interact with Ian quite a bit, and I think Go is a good project to contribute to, so that's why I think having a discussion about it is useful, and that's pretty much it.
Great. So maybe let's just start. We've got tooling as one of the things in the title there. What do we actually mean when we talk about tooling? It's used a lot, and people talk about it a lot in talks. What do we mean by tooling? Ian, do you want to kick us off?
So on my team, we mean basically the developer experience. If it's not a library and it's not the compiler or runtime, then it's tooling. So it's the Go command itself, it's Go Please, which is our new tool, it's all of the other tools that your editor invokes for you, it's the linters, the vets, basically everything that you interact with that helps you do your job from your IDE is tools.
Daniel, you write a lot of tools. Anything that you would add to that in terms of, from your perspective?
I guess one thing I would add is that people tend to think tools is just linting or building Go code, but it doesn't have to do anything with Go code directly. It could just be a tool to, for example, show Go documentation or help you release new Go code, or maybe something else to help you develop code, not just Go. But if it's written in Go or helps you write Go, it's Go tooling, I would say.
So a lot of that really comes down to sort of efficiency from the developer's perspective as well as their experience. Ian, you mentioned Go Please there. Not everyone in the audience is necessarily familiar with Go Please. Do you want to just talk about that a bit more?
Of course they are. So Go Please is the Well, it's Rebecca Stamler's really. I just kind of hang around it. It's the new LSP implementation for Go,
LSP being?
language server protocol, invented by Microsoft, by the people that originally invented Eclipse and decided to move on. And it's a way of kind of taking what used to be, I think in VS Code it was 28 separate tools, and trying to do it all in one tool. And instead of being launched every time you want to do it, it runs in the background and knows everything up front so that it can do it much, much faster.
This is from the editor's perspective.
From the editor's perspective, yeah. So it's like most of what we think about is how can we reduce the amount of time a developer's time is wasted on things that they shouldn't have to care about.
And Rebecca gave a very good talk actually about Go Please at GopherCon this year, so that's probably a place for people to learn more about Go Please.
Yeah, because she's a much better talker than I am.
Daniel, why do you like working on tooling? We're talking about it from the developer's perspective, the end user's perspective, that it's an efficiency saving, but why do you work on tooling and why do you contribute to the Go project and tooling within the Go project?
Well, as developers, we're all lazy, right? And the work you do as part of your day job might not be very exciting. So at least tooling for me is a way to optimize myself so I can still work on it during my work hours. But at the same time, I get to learn about cool stuff, such as how to actually write Go tools or how to read or interpret or static or type check Go code. So it's just a way to, at the same time, improve my own workflow and other people's workflow, but also learn these things, which I think are really cool.
And a large part of your contributions are, as I said, open source. In fact, they're the only contributions I'm aware of. So that's presumably something you'd encourage other people to do as a means of learning about sort of things like tooling and getting involved in it?
I'm just going to echo something that Ian said earlier, which is that the Go team is surprisingly small for all that they have to do. And with modules being, I would say, 2 years old at this point, more or less, there's a lot of work left to do, and I'm sure many of you are aware of that. So if you find a rough edge that you think could be done better or fixed or a little bug or something like that, if you help them with that, they might take a little bit to review the piece of code because, again, they're few people, but they're probably going to be grateful for it, for your help.
One thing, sorry, Ian, just to jump in and say that if anybody is, you don't need to be making a contribution to sort of a tooling project or submitting a change or anything to contribute. On Slack, there are a number of channels. The tools channel in the Gopher Slack is one of them. And we have the Golang Tools monthly call as well. And there's a mailing list where people of vastly different experience are just asking questions about tooling and how can they contribute to the Go Please project, for example. Maybe, Ian, that's something you want to talk about a bit more about, how it's really welcome to everybody who might want to contribute. Feedback is one form of contribution, changes are other forms of contribution.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, I was trying to estimate how long it would take to do the work that I believe my team absolutely should do, that I know about right now, and I gave up when I got to 11 years. There is a huge amount to do. There is no way we can do it on our own. We absolutely need a strong tools community for this stuff to be as good as it could be, and we know it could be. So yeah, I absolutely love contributors. Like, I spend more of my time attempting to encourage contributions than I do actually doing the work, because that's how I'm going to actually get where I want to go with this stuff. So yeah, we are very welcoming to contributors, and there are lots of easy on-ramps to contributing. You can start just by helping answer other people's questions until you become an expert and start wanting to change the thing you're answering questions about. Like, it's really easy to get into this stuff, and there's some really important, useful work there.
We can share links to the Slack group and all these other ways of getting in touch, because Ian and his team are part of this Slack group. And as Ian said, they're very open to people contributing, and you can actually see this happening, if you like, in public, live, as people are saying, "Hey, I'd like to work on the Go Please project. Can you suggest a starting point for me?" It's an incredible group there, and there's been some significant contributions from people who aren't at Google.
Yeah, very much so. We've had a couple of contributors that are owning large chunks of Go Please now because they're well known as the experts in that area and have made it considerably better than any of the other tools in the same space.
Just going back to why we're talking about tooling, what makes Go good for tooling, Daniel?
I think the main reason is that the language itself is simple. So getting an idea for a tool to work with Go code is not very difficult. Whereas, with much more complex languages like Python or Java, it might take you years to even understand the whole language. And in the case of Go, the spec is still quite long, but it's much, much shorter than the other cases. And the libraries and tools for you to write your own tools are also pretty much ready to use and pretty simple to use as well. So you can go from not knowing anything about Go tooling to writing a pretty simple tool in, I would say, less than a day, which is amazing.
Actually had someone come up to me at the break and ask a question about how do I get started using sort of the tools and the packages that parse Go code to understand the structure of Go code. Ian, that's sort of again a questions like that are great starter questions in the tools Slack channel, and not only your team but other people in that Slack channel help sort of get started on that journey from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some really good examples of it too that we can point you at to look at. There's a lot of tools that process Go code out there, and they're all quite easy to read.
So maybe just moving on to talk about some of those packages. Do you want to? We talked about Go Please. Go Packages is one that's maintained by your team as well. Do you want to just give a bit of an overview of, because that really encompasses quite a lot, doesn't it? Go Packages.
Yeah. So Go Packages is kind of a replacement for a bunch of other older standard library packages. And its purpose was to abstract away tools from the underlying build system. And the main reason that we started this work was because modules is essentially a different underlying build system. It lays out code in a different way. You find code in a different way. What constitutes a package is different. And changing to modules broke basically every single tool that understood Go code. So Go Packages was an attempt to produce a newer, better API to that level of how you look at code. And underneath, it actually just uses Go list. And we did that so that it's kind of agnostic as to the version of Go you're using as well, because it's running the Go command to find things. So as we gradually change, how modules work, Go Packages isolates you from that using Go list so that your tool, without even being recompiled, will still continue to work. It's a surprisingly simple looking package, but it was a surprisingly complicated problem to work out what that package should look like. We tried a lot of variations before we settled on what it is right now. It's not 100% stable. I mean, its existing features are stable, but we're not completely opposed to adding more features as we find new use cases that people need. But yeah, it's really useful for writing tools on top of.
Let's build on that point there, because that's sort of an abstract presentation of what Go Packages is and what it can do. Daniel, you've written a number of tools that use Go Packages. Do you want to talk about one of those and sort of introduce how Go Packages gets used as part of that?
So before Go Packages, I would use a library called Go/loader. And like Ian said, Go Packages uses Go list. So it simply does whatever your Go installation does to load or to find Go packages. But back in the Go loader days, and those were dark days, basically your tool would directly do all of the work. So like Ian said, from one version to another, the tool would break. Not always, but always. Every single Go release, something subtle would change or break and cause nightmares. So the new API is higher level. So I basically removed, I would say, about 50 lines of code. I still get all the information that I want. It's a tiny bit slower in general to start up because it has to call the Go command as opposed to just doing the work directly. But in the long term, it's just making my life so much easier as a maintainer.
What one tool do you have in mind that where you're using Go Packages that we perhaps direct people to afterwards as an exemplar of using Go Packages?
So one example is a tool called GoGrep, which is a very inventive name, as you can imagine. But when it used Go/loader, the old library, it would basically just scan your Go path to find the packages that you ask it to find, and then grep for an expression or for a statement or for some piece of code within those packages. So far, so good. Now in the module world, there's no Go path, so obviously the tool just didn't work at all. So now, using Go Packages, I simply ask Go Packages, find me this package, or find me this list of packages. And whatever build system you're using, be it GoPath, be it modules, be it Blaze or something else, it should, in theory, still work. I might not be testing all of the cases because I'm lazy, but it should still work. And the package is now a higher level, which is nice.
So that's great. We'll send out a link to GoGrep afterwards because that makes concrete in a tool that you can actually use and understand what the tool actually does. you can then look at the source code to see how Go packages are being used. Because I think Go packages has some documentation on how to get started with the package, but not, it doesn't, I don't think it actually points to any example tools of here is a real life tool using it. So we might just use GoGrep as a starting point for that. There are plenty others, which if you asked in the tools channel, people could direct you towards. Ian, you talked about Go Please earlier on as being the glue effectively between a user's editor and the code that they are writing, telling you whether there are any parse errors, type checking errors. There's been a recent change to include static check as part of Go Please as well. Do you want to talk a bit about that and just perhaps explain for everybody here what static check is and what additional benefits it's bringing to the editor experience?
Well, I assume everybody here knows what static check is, because everybody should be running it all the time. So Dominic Honeff wrote static check. It's the best of the static checkers for Go. It finds an enormous amount of things that you're doing wrong and tells you to fix them. But it's a completely separate tool that used to work in a very, very different way. And one of the things that we did on top of Go packages was create a new package called Go Analysis. And this kind of unified the way you write static checkers in Go. And then Dominic Honeff kindly ported all of static check to this new framework and then wrote a new runner that he uses. But because all of the checks were rewritten this way, you can now plug them into anything that knows how to run Go Analysis analyzers. And Go Please happens to be one of those things. So actually putting static check into Go Please was me adding a long list of things to link in, and that was it. He did all the work, and it's amazing. And it's kind of important to understand this concept because analyzers, static checkers are incredibly useful, and they're very, very easy to write. But there's a lot of static checkers that are very custom to specific companies, code bases, libraries. And you should probably look into writing them to find things early and save yourselves a lot of time.
So just to sort of pull all this together, you talked about Go Please as providing any editor that can talk to Go Please that same kind of developer experience. So it's going to tell you when you have syntax errors in your code, when there are type checking errors, and then this analysis phase you're talking about here, which is where static check comes in, tells you about those things that the compiler doesn't tell you. So for example, if you've got a format.printf and you've got a verb in there, but you're missing an argument, static check's going to start telling you along with vet about these sorts of errors. So again, we can probably point people towards some examples here of getting started if they're interested in writing analyzers their own.
Well, Michael gave a really good talk on it. So Michael Matloob is the owner of that particular package, and he gave a really good talk on it recently, so we should probably point you at that.
Yeah, that's a GopherCon UK talk, so we can definitely link to that as well. One thing that Russ Cox in a recent blog post talked about is the importance of experiments. And a lot of the conversations that happen in the tooling Slack channel, on the mailing list, and on the monthly calls is about using tools as experiments. Daniel, you have one experiment in particular, which is quite a recent one. Do you want to talk about that?
I actually gave a short talk about it at this meetup, I want to say about 6 months ago. And it's basically a fork of GoFMT, the tool. And I called it GoFumt, spelled how it's pronounced, with FUMPT. So the idea there is to confuse everybody, so I think that's working. And the reason is, I think GoFumt, the original tool, could be better and do more things, and basically enforce a stricter syntax, no, a stricter style in your code formatting. But I don't want to send lots of CLs and patches to Robert Grissomer, the maintainer of GoFumt, because he has a lot of work to do. And basically, if I send him a patch, he's going to be like, have you actually tested this on lots of code? And I'm going to say no. So this is the point of the experiment. I implement those changes outside in my fork. People can test them. I can see which changes make people angry. And the ones that don't make people angry, I can then propose them to be upstreamed.
Ian, we've seen a number of experiments like this. I guess Vigo is one that was the precursor to modules, and TryHard was one as part of the Try proposal as well. So this sort of experimentation is something that it actually has a lot of weight, if you like, within the Go team as well.
Yeah, it's very much part of how the team works. Even Go Please was an experiment for a long time before we were willing to say, yes, this is the right choice. Everything we do is an experiment. And it's quite difficult to manage those experiments sometimes, particularly as we need people to try the experiments to see if they work. But as soon as we release something to people, they assume that that's it, it's decision made. And then, it gets difficult very fast. So it's important to always remember that, experimentation is really important to us. You need to try stuff. You need to tell us if it's not a working experiment. And you need to accept that we are willing to abandon experiments that don't work.
I think I've asked enough questions. So we're going to open it up to the audience here.
I just want to point out one.
Yeah, sorry.
GoFumped. You're going to convert that to an analysis engine and suggested fixes, right?
Can I answer that later?
Kat has got a roaming mic there. We may have some questions coming in via the YouTube channel, which I think you're going to ask, Kat. Oh, there's already one. Let's start with that one then, because that can warm everybody up.
So the first question from Duco is, how can companies run or include their own custom private analyzers in GoPLS? Somewhat of a troll question, as I know there is no definite answer on this yet, but nice to elaborate on it in a larger audience.
Well, Ian actually solved this earlier on, so over to Ian.
You are so mean. Yeah. How I wish Go plugins were any good. That's essentially the problem. Like, GoPlease needs to be extensible. We need a way of plugging new functionality into it, and there is no good answer for this in Go yet. But it is very, very important to us. We're continuously trying new things to see if we can find a good answer. If anybody in this room knows one, please come talk to me.
But there's a couple of working hypotheses, I think, that
so I mean,
being toyed with.
We do allow, like, the way we added static check to GoPlease, for instance, is as a weird compiled-in plugin, essentially. So you can build a version of GoPlease with lots of extra bits inside it if you try, but you have to actually rebuild it. It's not something you can do with an installed GoPlease.
So sort of watch this space to see how that develops. Any others via the Slack? Anybody in the audience, please just shout out any questions. As you said, if anybody has any questions about how you would even get started, for example, got a question in the front here. I'll move as well. Here we go.
Just to jump back to the experiments, could you talk really briefly about the experimental directory, like the /x directory, and kind of what that is and what its status and how do things get there and where do they go and what's going on there?
Do you mean X or XExp?
XX, EXP.
So X is not experimental. X is things that probably don't deserve to be in the standard library, but the Go team kind of owns. Whereas XExp, which is one of those repositories, is entirely experimental.
Sorry.
So do things move from XExp up into X after? I mean, what's the difference between those? And why aren't if something's not in the standard library and it's in X, what's the difference between a package that's in and one that's in X and one?
Yeah, this is a surprisingly complicated question because historical. So, for instance, the tools repository is full of all sorts of stuff that probably shouldn't be in the tools repository.
Just to say, when we're talking about these repositories here, these are golang.org/x/something something. So these are nominally Go team owned repositories, and Ian's now just talking about the tools, one of those repositories.
Yeah. So there is one special repository called exp, which is supposed to be the repository for experiments and generally is moving forwards. And there's a few things happening in there at the moment. And nothing in xexp is promised to survive. We're happy to delete it on a whim. Whereas the other repositories are, they don't obey the same compatibility rules as the main standard library, but it's much closer. We don't like breaking people in the other repositories if we can avoid it. But that also causes us trouble. So the tools repository is full of things that were kind of put in there just because somebody didn't know where else to put it. And they really shouldn't be there, but we're not willing to delete them now because we'd break somebody. So there isn't really one consistent story for all the other repositories. And a few people have asked if they're like experiments that should eventually become part of the standard library. And I actually think the opposite is true. I think more things shouldn't be in the standard library and should be in an X repository. But yeah, there isn't like a clear, You start here, you migrate to here, you reach this level, you migrate to somewhere else. There isn't a clear story on that.
You mean there's no badge system?
No.
Oh dear. Does that answer, Zach? Excellent.
My question was going to be about the experimental features as well. Excuse me. So I'll kind of follow on from that. The tool set is quite fully featured, and that's one of the powerful things, and that's one of the great selling points. But do you think there's a kind of boundary at which you really should stop building tools for those edge cases, or how would you, the kind of stuff that's in that package now that you probably would like to delete? How could we stop that from appearing in the first place?
Yeah. I think if you look back far enough, the repositories didn't really have a clear mission. So people put things in them because the name was vaguely sensible. Like, for instance, the tools repository has Go Present in it because it's kind of a tool, but it doesn't really fit with any of the other tools in there. And I think if that was coming into existence today, one of the team would say, no, it shouldn't be here, it should go somewhere else. But we're also not willing to clean it up. So yeah, I think it will always be a slightly confusing place because of the historical things, but I think we're being much better about only putting things in the sensible place moving forwards.
And modules help with that going forward, but again, that doesn't really address the
It would affect tools was a module.
Beth, thank you. Oh, thank you.
Previously, you mentioned that there is no any plugin system. I just wonder personally, what prevents you from just making the calls to other compiled Go programs, so you can use them as a plugin system? Just put some folder and call them and outsource whatever you want to do and get the output. Is it anything that I don't think about it preventing you?
It depends. So if you're talking about Go Please specifically, one of the reasons Go Please is enormously faster is because it doesn't do the work on demand. It parses and type checks and analyzes your code as it sees it changing. But this means it's holding a huge amount of information in memory and doing a very large amount of work as you type characters. And trying to share that memory with a second process is almost impossible. It was one of the experiments we tried that failed miserably. Redoing the work in a second process when you already have a Go Please process eating 4 gigabytes is kind of harsh. And if you had one per plugin, that's even worse. So yeah, it is a hard problem to solve. And yeah, there is a Go plugin system that lets you load another binary as if it was part of your process and then invoke methods in it. But it requires the plugin to be compiled with an identical copy of the toolchain and libraries as the host. And it doesn't work on Windows, so it's completely unviable.
I think we have a question online, and then I'll jump to you there.
We have a question from Paul Berlumi. When will Go Please be finished? What is the upcoming roadmap for Go Please?
Wow, it's almost like we planted these questions. That wasn't me asking that question. That's a different Paul.
I don't believe
It's a different
you.
Paul.
I saw you at your laptop. Go Please will never be finished, ever. It will be ready for use, but it won't be finished. Like I say, I can think of an endless list of things it could do and should do that would make your lives better. So it really won't ever be finished. Good enough for use is complicated because it's good enough for my use right now. My entire team uses it all the time. Lots of people use it all the time, but it also has lots of edge cases that break. And if you happen to be one of the people that hit those edge cases, you're definitely not going to think it's ready for use. We want it to be good enough for the majority of people by the end of the year-ish. We think that switching to Go Please is by far the best way to deal with modules inside your editor. And we want to start recommending to people that they should be using modules very strongly. And we can't do that if the editor experience is not good enough. So we're pushing hard to have something that's good enough for everybody to use by the end of the year.
But just to clarify, it effectively is, as you said, ready for use right now. It's not like we're still in the development phase. So if people are interested, they should try and use it via their editor. And there's, again, we can link to the documentation that helps people get started in their various editors. And there is a Go Please, spelt Go PLS channel in Slack that we'll also link to as well.
And given the number of issues that get reported, an awful lot of people are using it.
Yes. We had a question just here.
Hi, my question is about modules. The implementation of Vigo and GoMod was quite like divisive in the community process. And my naive understanding is that GoMod takes a slightly different approach from lots of the other package management and dependency tooling for other languages like Yarn or NPM or pip or whatever. Can you speak a little bit about like some of the decisions that were made, why that was chosen, and then maybe you, Ian, and then Daniel also as an open source maintainer, like how has it had any changes? Do you have to think about things any differently now that we're in a Go modules kind of world rather than whatever world we were in before that? Sorry, there's many questions in there at once.
Yeah, I'm just trying to rewind in my head to the first one. So yeah, I mean, essentially modules are because Russ Crox is probably one of the smartest people in the universe. It's designed to solve a very specific set of problems, and not everybody agrees that those are the right problems to solve, and that's where a lot of the division comes from. We think that stability of builds is probably more important than any other possible property of a good build system. We also think that trusting your builds and libraries is one of the most important things that's missing from many build systems today that we need moving forwards. We're becoming a very cloud-focused world. We're using a lot more third-party dependencies from GitHub. There's a lot of very important code running using open source projects from GitHub, and just trusting the tip of some random repository is really not a good idea anymore. So Russ had that very firmly in his mind when he was designing the MVS algorithm that sits underneath.
MVS being minimal version selection.
Minimal version selection, yeah. So it's really designed for stability and trustworthiness above all other considerations. And not everybody agrees that that's the right choice, and that's okay.
Just to clarify, I think it's an excellent question. And when we talk about the community, I just like to keep in mind that when I'm thinking about the community, it's everybody who uses Go. And even that's at Google and people not at Google as well. I think even in Google, there's probably going to be a list of people who say, no, actually, I disagree with that as an approach. But I think in terms of the presentation of the problems that it was looking to solve, I think that was the guiding light, if you like, as opposed to we must follow the pattern of previous package managers. Daniel, I think there was an excellent follow-up question about how that's influenced what you do.
So I think the biggest difference is the top of the readmes. The top of the readmes used to say, or at least some of them still do, go get -u blah, 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 some package. And Ian is laughing because this has many problems. The biggest one being, if you run that command today, it's going to do something different than what it did yesterday or tomorrow, because master of different repos that you depend on is going to change constantly. And people tend to not do API breaking changes, but still, if you have more than a couple dependencies, your project is your code is gonna be quite complex. And if one little dependency changes slightly, maybe some edge case is gonna completely break. So with modules, you do a go get of something, and that build that the user is getting is exactly the same that the developer was using to test and was using as well. So now when I get bug reports, just by looking at exactly what version of my project they were using, I know exactly what code they were running. Before that, I was just guessing, oh, when exactly did they run go get -u? Did they forget the -u flag and they're running the dependencies from 2 years ago? Because that was a possibility. So I think today I can sleep much better knowing that I can get exactly the same setup that my users are getting.
So I think that one of the impacts from my perspective is, as Ian talked about earlier on, the tooling has, in some situations, sort of regressed a tiny bit. But actually, overall, the experience is so much better. That, to my mind, is outweighing in terms of a benefit the regression in these small regressions in various tools. And I think what's impressive to see as well, and we saw it at GopherCon, that we had a couple of tooling sessions at GopherCon this year, is the amount of effort, and sort of by that I mean people in the Go team who were actually working on the tooling things, the tooling projects. We also had people from other companies there and their sort of platform/tooling teams as well. So in some respects, I think modules has helped to focus people's minds on tooling as well. And there's a sort of a more stable base now that we can all talk the same language in terms of versions of source code and of source code interchange. We can have a more sensible conversation about, right, let's build tools on top of that. Whereas before they were like, well, hang on, are we going to do GoPath or Glide or whatever? And so now we've got this one approach, and there's the proxy there as well. We have the SumDB, which gives us that security aspect to knowing the code that we're running as well. So I think, yes, it has been a turbulent period, and I think there's disagreements along the way, but actually we find ourselves in a much better position now, would be my assessment as well. Any other questions? Oh, Slack, do we have another one, Kat? Oh.
So there's one slightly trolling question. So will modules be enabled by default in 1.14?
Modules are already enabled by default. If you have a go.mod, you're using modules. That's it. There is nothing else to enable by default. What isn't done is switching Go 1.11 modules to on by default, but that is equivalent to deprecating GoPath, and no, that won't be in 1.14.
Reason being that really that's a step that doesn't need to be taken now, presumably, because people are still using GoPath. They're not forced to use modules.
Yeah, so we don't particularly feel the urge to force everybody to switch. We think the system is good enough that you will all switch anyway in the long run. We're happy to wait for people to switch before we turn it all off, all the old systems. We don't want to wait forever because there's a lot of code in there we don't want to keep maintaining forever. But when we see that the majority of people have switched to modules because we've made it good enough, then we'll start considering turning the old systems off.
I have a question at the back over here.
Yeah, sorry, me again. Just a quick question, actually, for the audience rather than the panel, because we're talking about GoPath and talk about modules. Is it possible to have a show of hands who's using modules in their stuff? Show of hands. And who's still using GoPath? So it's about 2/3, a third, I think. Something like that. Okay, thanks.
So that was around, I actually sort of had that as around 80-20, 80 using modules, 20% GoPath. Of course, there may be people who are actually using a mix of the two, but got a question at the back here.
Hi. First of all, thank you so very much for all your work in Go Please and Go Closer. Okay, sorry. So my question is basically, what do you think about the development and developer experience for Go modules in the past 2-3 versions? So between the last couple of versions, there have been a number of things that either broke or changed the way modules work. So this has created a number of issues for projects and companies with large number of dependencies and stuff like that. So in addition to that, things like the Go mod sum and changes to the way Go Get deals with Athens and stuff like that have messed up the promise of Go of keeping backwards compatibility and stuff. No? So my question is to you, is this something that developers are doing wrong, package maintainers are doing wrong? Is there a way to be more proactive on how to help with those things, identify issues before they happen?
So I think there's a few things in there. One is, I guess in some ways we were surprised by how much use modules got when it was still experimental. We weren't ready to stabilize some of those things because they were an experiment that we were looking to change to make as good as it could be. And we're looking, Go is 10 years old very soon. We're looking at the next 20 years and trying to make sure the system's built right for the long term. So in some ways, we're willing to accept a small amount of pain and disruption now to minimize the pain and disruption for the next 20 years. I think 1.13 was the first time when we kind of encouraged people to use modules. We were like, yes, they really are good enough now. And we are in a phase where we're trying to make sure we don't break people anymore. But we weren't before that. The other thing to note is the Go command itself does not obey the Go compatibility promise. The Go compatibility promise applies to the language and the libraries. We try and maintain it anyway, and for the most part we have, but it doesn't technically have to. But yeah, and basically it was still an experiment. Going back to experiments, it was still an experiment, and fixing the experiment is more important than not breaking people until it's good. We think it's good now. We think all of the existing remaining problems are in tools and documentation, not in modules themselves. We've thought that basically since we turned the proxy on. The proxy was kind of the last big piece of the picture to help people understand why we were doing some of the things we were doing. But yeah, documentation is by far the biggest problem. One of the issues is we haven't documented what the happy path is. So people have been a long way off the happy path. We really, really need to fix that. We know that. There's a lot of people trying to work on documentation. It's also one of the areas where it's easiest to come and help. If you want to join in and help, that's a really good place.
Pointing out the gaps in documentation as well is critically important, because people see documentation from lots of different perspectives. I know we have another question coming in online, but Daniel, I just want to, on that particular point, you've helped and encouraged a number of people via contributor workshops and the like to actually get involved in contributing to the Go project and other open source projects. Can you just talk about quite fortuitously, someone at the break came up to me and said, "How can I get involved?" What would your advice to someone be? Let's sort of touch on that from a couple of different perspectives. The Go project itself, i.e. the compiler, etc., and or Go Please. How would you encourage someone to start thinking about that? They know they want to contribute. Where next?
So I think you should find what you find really interesting. So is that tooling? Is that compilers? Is that the standard library or some piece of a standard library? Is it tests? Is it documentation? And then you basically either look for some hole that you see in one of those pieces, or maybe a rough edge that you've seen, or maybe a bug that you've seen on the issue tracker that you think you could fix, and then just go have a try with it. If it's the first one you do, it's probably going to take you a while. It might take you a few hours to just understand what you need to do, but that's normal because Go is a pretty complex open source project, and getting involved the first time takes a little bit of time. But that's where places like Slack come in and help you, because, for example, there's the tools channel, but there's also a channel called contributing, and you can go in there and be like, help me, I want to contribute and fix this bug, but I don't know what I'm doing. And somebody is most likely going to help you.
And also meetups as well, presumably. The London Slack channel is very popular. If someone said, "Oh, I'm interested in wanting to contribute to the Go project," I know there are a number of people in here who already are contributing to the Go project, and they would almost certainly be happy as well to have a conversation with somebody at a meetup as well about, or how do you get started? So just feel free to ask those questions. People are very, very helpful, more helpful than you might actually think. And when you're actually sort of meeting someone in person at a meetup like this, it can just be a bit of an easier icebreaker than asking the question on Slack to someone who might be in a different time zone. Kat, we had another question.
Yes, we do. So this is a follow-up on the topic. So follow up on the X/ repositories and the potential for small breaking changes that are occurring in them. Will these repos move to Semver releases to remain compatible with modules, or rather remain indefinitely on an evergreen v0 model?
I wish I knew the answer. So tools in particular is difficult because in the world of modules, there is no way on earth you would make a repository that looks like tools. It's just wrong for that universe. So we've had a lot of discussions about, should it have submodules even though we don't like submodules and nested modules, or should it all be like the whole tools repository has one version, in which case does a tiny change to one of the tools require every tool to change major version? It's a really complicated repository to decide what to do, and that's fundamentally what's stopping it from going to modules. It's a weird one also because it's kind of a module. It does have a go.mod file, it just doesn't have a version.
But Go Please, which exists as a submodule within there, that is a plan to...
Right. So the Go Please is kind of done how it should be done, in that it's a binary that has its own major version that's separate from the library that it depends on. And we're trying to decide if we should do that for more of the contents of XTools or not.
So I guess because we're running out of time, there's one final question for Daniel. How many badgers does it take to build all the tools?
a lot of them. So if you go on the tools channel, you're going to see hundreds of people. And for some reason, they've picked up this badger emoji and they keep sending it. Nobody knows where it comes from, so we just go along with it.
Maybe we have time for one last question if there is. Everyone's out of questions. That can only be a good thing. Daniel, Ian, thank you very much indeed. We will send out links to, I'll make sure I look back through the recording and then we send out links to all of those various bits that we've talked about there. Because of course we couldn't know what we were going to talk about ahead of time. And please just ask questions, experiment with tools and write tools in order to make everybody more happy and efficient. Okay, thank you both. Okay, so, oh no, the kicker, oh, there's the clicker. Thank you to our sponsors, Martin from Vistas Recruitment, Utility Warehouse, who you saw at the front here, Bud, who aren't here, but they do still sponsor us, and Monzo, who have kindly hosted us today. Good turnout, thank you very much. Our next meetup is a big one because it's Go's 10th birthday in November. So we will be having sort of lots of free gifts to give everybody who comes along to the next meetup. It's not raffled. Everyone will get free gifts. It will be at Cloudflare. We already have the meetup date and all the details in the meetup calendar. So you can take photos of this, but literally if you go to the London Gophers meetup page, the date is already in there. Sign up will be opening 3 weeks, exactly 3 weeks before that date. So you can set your alarms right now to know when to sign up. We had over 500 people respond to this meetup tonight. Clearly, we still have a number of people who don't actually turn up. But next month, because we're giving away free stuff, it's likely that everybody will turn up. Then in December, we're back at Lush. For anyone who came along last year, that was an absolutely exceptional evening. So look forward to going back there in December. Am I forgetting to say anything else, Kat? Antonio? Good. So lastly, thank you again to our hosts for tonight, Monzo. And if anyone would like to join us for the social afterwards, people will sort of start to gather at the front and then leave to head down to the Fox. Thank you very much.
Can you please make sure you throw all your bottles away before you go outside? Otherwise, we will be sued. So please throw all your bottles away. Yeah, we want to continue hosting meetups. We don't want to be sued. Thank you.